Hello and welcome to the lecture on Unit 2 questions. So this is the second set of source questions, set of 5. So for this year in Year 11, you will have your Unit 1 questions, which you have just completed for America and Capitalism, and now you're looking at a different set for Unit 2, Nazism in Germany. So the next 2 assessments for source analysis will contain these questions. In the exam, the document set that relates to capitalism in America will have the Unit 1 set of questions, and the document set that relates to Nazism in Germany will have these questions. So it's very important that you understand what is required. Okay, so 1A. Explain the historical course of source 1 is exactly the same as the Unit 1 question. So in this one, you need to make sure that you're covering all of the criteria. So the big thing here that I just want to draw attention to, I'm just scrolling up now, you can see the yellow highlight there, is that this question does not require you to have any examples or any analysis from the source. If you choose to put it in there, it won't mean anything. It counts for absolutely nothing. The only thing you need to do is identify the focus of the source, which you can usually do from the information that you get from the source. Everything else is really what you know about what is happening at the time. So that's, when did it happen, what happened, why, what were the immediate events as well. Don't go too far back because it's only worth 1 mark. And then you've just got to make sure that you're providing the events, the key people, the idea, the dates and the places. So it's always, the better marks for this one is always going to be on the detail. So specific dates for events, the full name of the people that are in the source, anything that you can think of in terms of things that are related to the source as well. And that's it for the first one. So just going down, having a quick look through your guide here, there is a lovely little scaffold there. Now with these colours, you should just you can just write those. And what you might want to do then is make a cheat sheet up using your answer using your answer sheet, and you can memorize these sentence prompts, and that way you're covering everything that you need to for this one. Okay, so let's move along now to compare and contrast the purpose of source 1 and source 2. Now, context questions in source 1 or context sources are always visual. Okay, so usually we get a photo prompt, or you might actually get a propaganda poster or an advertisement or something along a newspaper front page, something along those lines. So you're always going to kind of run into one of those. Usually, though, you also have a written purpose source, so you can see the comparison and the contrast. So the sources I choose have to have some elements of similarity in terms of their purpose, and they also need to be slightly different, or else, of course, very hard for you to answer the question. So what you've got to do here is a lot more than just identifying the purpose. So it's asking you to also have a look at what's going on at the time as well. So let's just go on down to likely purposes. So there's a nice table here. We've already gone through this one. But basically, this is a good guide. What you don't want to get into the habit of is saying the purpose of this is to show. Because sometimes the purpose is not ever just to show something. It might be to inform, but that's usually more of an educational aspect. A lot of sources in history have a very specific likely purpose, and the table you're now looking at, it gives you a really good overview, and it's a good place to start. So normally if you have a political cartoon, you would be looking at it providing some kind of commentary on society or on the political sort of events of the time, on the parties. So it can provide a social comment, and that's when it's tapping into the public opinion. Or it can actually critique those contemporary events or people. So that might be ridiculing political figures. And you might see that with the Weimar Republic and, having them looking like very stuffy businessmen. We saw it last semester with the robber barons, in the capitalist unit, where they all looked very fat and sort of, big heads and really sort of gathering up that power. So that's normally when you look at a critique. When you're having a look at a speech by a political leader or any kind of government documents, that usually is going to provide a justification for a particular policy or action. It's very rare that you'll see a political leader get up and say, oh, hey, yes, I just wanted you guys to all know about this great policy I've got. Yep, awesome. It's never just that. They want to actually talk about why they're introducing this policy. They might want to, justify the actions they're taking so that you feel good about it and will vote for them. Basically, that will happen a lot, even if it's a dictatorship, especially in the early years, because Hitler's trying to get supporters. And often that's the kind of thing that you'll see behind particular speeches. It might be also not just to provide a justification, but in Hitler's case, it could also be to motivate people to, carry out his sort of policies, motivate people or inspire them to join the Nazi Party. So when you're writing about a purpose, you want to use what I call action words. So they're kind of doing words and verbs. So what that means is that particular purpose might be to inspire, or it might be to justify, to criticize, and it might be to also discuss an argument or present an argument, or introduce an argument, and so on and so forth. And of course, a lot of texts are produced to persuade people to act in a certain way. So they're the kind of things you need to look at. And just to reinforce, we don't want to hear it's just to inform or it shows this, because that's really not always what the purpose will be. It's rarely that. For some, yes, but not much. Okay, so letters, diaries, journals, memoirs, recounts, eyewitness account. Sometimes that's just to show, or not to show, I've said it now, to provide or present a first-hand account or a personal account of the events experienced by individuals. Now, that might change, as we were discussing in class. You might have a letter from a soldier at the front, and the likely purpose for that is to actually let his family know that he is still alive. And that's the purpose you want to tap into, not the fact that we're using it 100 years down the track to actually see what happened. That's like a secondary purpose of it. So you want to look at actually, well, why was this letter written? Was it to reassure? Was it to, have like a dying wish fulfilled? Or was it just to sort of, alleviate that worry? Some people will take a diary just to record it for their own personal use. So that could also be a thing as well. Like people will often write in a journal just to share with, have it on paper to evaluate and reflect on their own thoughts. So again, they might not necessarily use that, but it has been used by historians to research and to get more information. Anne Frank's diary is a perfect example. It was a private diary that was really never meant to see the light of day, but her father decides to publish it so that he can present that experience of what it was like to actually go into hiding and to live at that time, in the hope that others would take a lesson from that. So there's lots of different sort of complicated purposes behind some of these. Mostly what you're going to get, as we were saying before, from anything from a text or from a historian, when you're looking at those more secondary sources, is to provide that historian's interpretation. And historians do that for lots of reasons. That could be a monetary expectation, where a lot of them are publishing books. It could be the reason why historians get into that is for research purposes, where they might want to have to contribute to their university and so on and so forth. So they usually are always presenting an interpretation, their own interpretation of what's been happening. And that sometimes can be to engage in a debate. So if one historian puts up a rather controversial argument, then you might get another historian that will go, hey, I'm going to actually, challenge that. So that can also happen too. So they're the things that you have to look out for with this. And of course, propaganda always really sets out to deliberately mislead or manipulate the viewer. Mislead, manipulate, deceive, persuade. Awesome words to use in your source analysis. I'd absolutely recommend that you use those for propaganda. And you're going to see propaganda in Nazi Germany. There is a lot in it. Okay, so what you're looking at here is the sentence scaffold for this question. Now you're going to look up the top there and go, oh, that's quite a lot. The issue portrayed in source 1 is, the message of source 1 is. Now this message one here is optional, because you can at first get very confused between message and purpose, and they're very different. The message is just what the source says. The purpose is why it's been created and what it's intended to do. So for some of you, if you're confident that you know the difference between message and purpose, then you can still put this in there. What I would do though, if you're not too sure at this early stage, just work out what the issue is. And that could just be, what's the underlying problem? What's something key that's going on at the time that you can see from this source? So if you're looking at a source maybe that is a propaganda source and it's centered around the one of the Nazi elections, then you might say the issue is that the Nazis are running for an election. And then you would go, the source 1 was constructed for the purpose of persuading the audience to vote for the Nazis in that election. And then you would use an example from the source. Now this one needs an example from the source. So unlike the context one, you must give an example from the source to support yourself, because you could get the purpose wrong. But if I can see it and it has a good example from the source, you'll still get the mark for it, because everyone has a different interpretation. So that's just some of the sentence structures you can use there. So just remembering that you must outline what the source is constructed for. Example. Okay? Each one. Then you've got to find their similarities. So what's similar about the sources? And that can be a bit tricky. So sometimes you might be looking at the topic or what's the common action that they're looking for. So possibly what you might find is a government speech and a picture might work quite well together, because the comparison or the similarity could be that they're both aiming, or they're both constructed to promote the ideas of the Nazi race. So and that's where sometimes if you get too stuck on, oh, it's always a justification for a speech, then that could undo you. So yes, speeches can be there to persuade, of course, as well, especially, if you're looking for supporters. So don't be afraid to look at other purposes at that table, just to give you an idea. And then how are they differing? So you want to make sure that you stick to purpose. Please do not get waylaid by message. It's very easy to say what they both say, and it's very easy to write down what they both show. But you're looking at why they are constructed. And again, you need to use examples here. So the fact a picture, a photograph is going to be, the likely purpose for that might be to advertise, to gain support, but to bring awareness to the Nazi Party, or it could be simply to record for the party references, or it might be a visual aid in a newspaper article or a newsletter. Just depends on what you're looking at. But a speech is going to be different in the fact that it might be, the target audience might be more directional, or it might want to justify a policy more so. So there are going to be differences between them. So that's kind of the challenge, I think, when you look at the sources. So once you do your practice, that's something to keep an eye out and reflect on. Okay, so let's keep working through. Explain the message of source 3. Now, this is one of those things where you will find that it's a bit of a tricky one. So what I'm going to do here, though, we're getting quite long on this lecture. I'm going to stop this lecture, and this will be part 1, and then I'm going to pick it up so you'll have 2 to look at, and that way we know I won't have it too big. So we'll see you in a minute for Explain the Message of Source 3.